if I'm having trouble managing these 3 single family properties by myself as a resident, what makes you think I can manage a whole apartment building? She was like, well, you don't have to go through it alone. And I was like, oh, okay. All right. Tell me more. And she was like, well, you go in it with other people. So there's an apartment building and you have a group, and there's one group who manages the asset. There's the other group who provides the capital. And therefore, like, you're able to have much more leverage and you focus on what you're good at.
Welcome to the Physicians and Properties Podcast, the show where we teach you how investing in real estate can give you the freedom to practice medicine and live life how you want.
Doctor!
Now, here's your host, Dr. Alex Schloe.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Physicians and Properties Podcast. As always, I'm your host here, Dr. Alex Schloe, and thank you for taking the time to listen to another episode. This episode was fantastic. This is with my new friend, Dr. Janeeka Benoit from Nashville, Tennessee. She is known as Dr. J. She's a full-time travel physician, real estate investor with over 60 units. We talk about in this podcast episode how she became an accidental landlord with a partnership that went bad. And this was during residency. This was during her 3rd year of residency. Partnership went bad. She ended up taking over some properties. And now she helps physicians and professionals regain their time through passive real estate investing in multifamily properties. Most importantly, so they can focus on family, freedom, and fulfillment. This episode was fantastic. If you learned something from this episode, can you do me a favor? Just share this with one physician who you think would benefit from this episode. I really appreciate it. That is how these podcasts grow. So without any further ado, let's get started with today's episode with Dr. Janeeka Benoit. Dr. Janeeka Benoit, it's so good to have you on the Physicians and Properties podcast, all the way from Nashville, Tennessee. How are things going?
Everything is going great. Thank you so much for having me on. And I'm really excited about our conversation tonight.
Absolutely. Me too. It's been really cool following you on LinkedIn and seeing everything that you've been doing. I was like, hey, we have got to get her on the podcast. So I'm glad we were able to make that happen tonight. Do you mind telling folks a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, my name is Dr. Janeeka Benoit, also known as Dr. J, and I am an accidental real estate investor. I actually started out in real estate as an accidental landlord and went through a lot of ups and downs throughout that journey. And not only was I an accidental landlord, but I became an accidental landlord during residency. This was my 3rd year in residency, 2nd or 3rd year of residency. And throughout that journey, I went through a lot of ups and downs, learning how to be a physician, learning how to be a landlord, real estate investor. And then I got into the world of apartment syndications. And I said, oh, wow, this is amazing, because it got me away from being a landlord because I got burned out from being a landlord. And I thought, what a neat avenue to bring to the physicianal and professional community for those of us who don't have the time to learn about real estate investing, but want to get started. And so that's how I started in this journey of passively investing in apartment buildings.
That's awesome. Well, let's take a step back, if you don't mind, pre-residency. So tell us a little bit about your internal medicine journey and your journey through medical school.
Yeah, so I trained in New York City, and that's where I'm originally from. I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York, and I trained in a community hospital. And it's New York. So if you can make it as a trainee in New York City, you can make it anywhere. And so I really enjoyed my internal medicine residency, but I knew that at that time, I worked during the COVID-19 pandemic. And so that was my last year of residency. I worked during the COVID-19 pandemic, and I was like actually done with the hospital. I was like, I don't want to do this hospital thing anymore. And I got into sports medicine. So I'm also fellowship trained in sports medicine. That's how I ended up in Nashville, because I graduated from Meharry Medical College in Nashville, Tennessee, and I've been here ever since. But I also fellowship trained in sports medicine. And because I graduated from sports medicine fellowship, during the height of pandemic, I graduated in 2020 now. I couldn't find a job. And then I went into locum tenens. And I thought that I was going to do that for 1 year. And then when the sports market opens back up, I'll dip my toe back in. And then I was like, hey, this is like really neat. And also with being a locum tenens physician, it helped me even widen my perspective about business and gave me even more business acumen because at the time I was managing 3 properties as a landlord. And so I was like, hey, I think, a lot of this can go hands in hands, right? Tenants, real estate, and I just stayed in the locum tenens world. And so I've actually never had a boss fellowship. I stayed in locum tenens now. And so I've been working as a locum tenens physician now for 3 years. And it's been a wonderful rise. It has ups and downs just like anything else. But I think what it has done, it's given me the flexibility to work on real estate. And then it also helps me broaden my business acumen and refine that even further.
That's awesome. We have not had anyone talk about locum tenens on the podcast before. So if someone doesn't know what that is, do you mind just kind of briefly explaining what that is and kind of what drew you to locum tenens?
Yeah, so locum tenens is basically you serve as a physician in a hospital or clinic where there is a need. So for example, if a physician is out on maternity leave or medical leave, then you would take the place of that physician. And that's typically how it works. Or it could be that they just have an employee shortage, right? Maybe too many physicians left at one time and they need someone to fill in to serve and see patients. And so that's how I function. So I get calls from recruiters, I get emails from recruiters asking if I can work a specific shift for a specified period of time. I will, decline or accept. And that's basically how it works. Now, the thing is, it's not, always guaranteed. And so becoming a locum tenens physician has made me very, very organized because I have to, I have to make sure that I have work, right? And so I'm typically planning months in advance to make sure that I have work months in advance. And I'm planning things around, okay, when do I have work, right? Because I want to make sure that I at least secure my assignments and then anything else gets, created around it. But ultimately, I do have the flexibility because I can decide to go for the assignment or not go for the assignment. And then the other thing is that all my expenses, they're tax deductible. So that's another neat thing about it. So, when you're getting extra licenses or you're going to medical conferences, that's part of my locums business and all of that is tax deductible. So that's essentially locums in a nutshell. And what drew me to locum tenens is really because I couldn't find a job. I couldn't find a job. And it's interesting. It's so interesting how just things work because I knew that ever since I was in residency that I wasn't going to be the typical doctor. I just always knew that. Like I always dreamed of having a business. I did not sure what that business was going to, but I couldn't see myself working until the age of 65 in medicine. But really how I saw myself creating a life that I created. I saw myself enjoying medicine because I've created it so that I can enjoy it. And so that's what I've always envisioned for myself. And so when I couldn't find a job and I was like, well, if I go into locum tenens, like this gives me some more freedom and flexibility and like deep down inside, like that's kind of like always what I've wanted. And so when the opportunity came, I just took it and here I am.
That's awesome. Are you typically doing 3-month, rotations or are they longer than that?
Yeah,
What's the timeline typically look like?
that's a great question. So initially I was doing primary care and sports medicine, locums. And because that requires continuity of care, they would prefer at a minimum that you would be there for 3 months or more. And so typically, I would be away from my home 3 months or more, but it got to a point where I was starting to get burnt out because I was away from home for so long and I just started to get homesick. And I actually switched into hospitalist medicine. So I actually work as a hospitalist now. and it's been great. So I've been working as a hospitalist now for the past 3 months. And so that's given me even greater flexibility because now I just work a couple of shifts. And so I only work 7 to 10 shifts out the month now versus, being somewhere for 3 months. And so it's given me a lot more time, a lot more flexibility. I actually just came back from celebrating my mom's birthday in Florida. And so I actually went to Florida right after my shift was over. I was in Minnesota and then I did a night shift. And so the following day, I went to Florida and celebrated my mom's birthday during the weekend. And it was great because if I was working the week before, I probably wouldn't be able to be as mobile. But because I've switched now to hospitalist medicine, I have way more time and flexibility. So it's been great.
That's awesome. Time and flexibility is not something that we hear often from doctors.
Right.
So really, really good. We were talking before the podcast about, me getting ready to kind of transition out of the Air Force and work more part-time. And I am very much looking forward to that time and flexibility as well. Only going to help grow the businesses from that perspective. So really looking forward to that. Well, let's set back to residency and being that accidental landlord. So what did that look like for you? How did that happen during your third year residency?
Oh my gosh. So I was actually a guarantor on a debt, and I was supposed to be just like a backseat, passenger in this real estate venture. And, with real estate and working with business partners, it's important to understand what your common goals are, what your common vision is before you get into anything, right? And so I would say that was mistake number one. Honestly, I had no idea. I was really just giving a favor to a family member. And that backfired very quickly, very quickly. And it got so bad where our property manager was actually stealing money from us. So instead of, depositing the rental income into our accounts, he was pocketing it for himself. And I just ended up doing a lot of the heavy lifting when I was supposed to be a backseat passenger. But it's so interesting. Anytime we go through challenges, it's important to understand the lesson, right? And so I said, number one is anytime you're going into business partnership, understanding what your common goal is, what your common vision is. And number two, any referrals also that you get from someone, it's important to just, double check, right? To make sure that that person is legitimate. So I learned a lot about people. And I think during that time, I was so, being a physician, it's just so different because like as a physician, we go in this business to help people, right? And a lot of the people that we encounter, they just really are in it to help people, right? It's either that they've maybe met a physician while they were a child and that inspired them to get into medicine, and that was their way of giving back by also going to medicine too. And so when I came into this world, I was like, oh wow, this is like very, very different. And I have to make sure that I am practicing a lot of discernment when it comes to partnering with anybody. And so that's what it taught me. It taught me how to be very discernful and to make sure that if I'm working with anyone that I truly understand who they are, like not only their vision, but also their values, right? What kind of person are they? What values do they hold near and dear to their hearts? Because you want to make sure that there is a common foundation between the two of you. And so that's what I learned from that experience. And at that time, I was dealing with 3 properties. I had a, property manager at the time, but this property manager, they mostly handled tenant complaints. So anytime there was a complaint by a tenant or a tenant had any question, it would go to them first. And if the property manager had any questions, then it would go to me. But it was tough. It was tough dealing with all of that, just kind of dealing with people in this aspect compared to what I, previously know in medicine. And so for that period of time, I was very jaded, honestly. I was so jaded about this business thing and about real estate. And it wasn't until I was speaking to my CPA and I literally just was bawling, crying, speaking to my CPA because at this point, I was just so overwhelmed. And, you go into, before then, I thought like I just had like a very positive mindset of the world and of people. And it just really just like was a rude awakening for me. And so I was sitting with my CPA and I was sitting there bawling, crying, like, I don't know how I got into this. And I'm just really overwhelmed and I don't know what to do. I don't know if I can continue to sustain these properties by myself. And she's told me, like, didn't even console me. She told me, you need to go bigger. And I'm like, what the heck are you talking about? And I'm like, is that all you have for me? Like, I'm crying. You're telling me I need to go bigger?
That's the advice you were expecting, I'm sure. Yeah.
Right. And I'm like, what do you mean I need to go bigger? I was like, I have like these 3 properties that's like hard for me to manage by myself. I'm in residency, like, and you're telling me to go bigger. And she was like, yes, you need to purchase apartment buildings. I was like, no, you don't understand. Like I need to back. If I'm having trouble managing these 3 single family properties by myself as a resident, what makes you think I can manage a whole apartment building? She was like, well, you don't have to go through it alone. And I was like, oh, okay. All right. Tell me more. And she was like, well, you go in it with other people. So there's an apartment building and you have a group and there's one group who manages the asset. There's the other group who provides the capital. And therefore, like, you're able to have much more leverage and you focus on what you're good at. And so where the responsibility does not solely fall on you. And I was like, oh, that sounds really great. And then she gave me a referral. And again, I made sure I vetted that referral to someone who was doing this, right? And this is actually my coach now. And I mean, he's honestly changed my life because I was ready to give up on real estate. And his name is Mike Ely, and he is the coach of the Big Money Mastermind. And this is his coaching program. And so he helps people how to develop apartment syndications. And I remember the first call was a master class that I attended, and I was really overwhelmed because people were talking about properties that cost $1 million. And I'm like, what is happening here? Am I right? Am I in the right room? I mean, you guys are talking in millions.
Yeah.
But I just continue to lean in and I just continue to lean in. And then afterwards, after thinking about it, and I was like, you know what? I think this is the right direction for me. I am in locums, I'm in real estate, and I really didn't want to give up on real estate. Even though it was tough for me in the beginning, it helped me, like I said, it helped me become more discerning of people. It helped me just really be more cautious of who I'm partnering with and just making sure that they're a good fit for me and making sure that we are aligned, right? It's important that there's alignment there. And that's helped me with anything, not just in business relationship, but just like personal relationships and just any relationship, right? Because not just in business, but any type of relationship that you're in, you want to make sure that there is an alignment and you want to make sure that there's a foundation and you want to make sure that you guys are moving in the same direction. And so it just made me more keen, right? Just more keen into the types of relationships that I'm getting into. And so I decided to join this mastermind. And, as a result of the mastermind, I'm now over 60 units in apartment syndication. And so it's been such a wild journey. It's been such a wild journey. But, and not only that, I would say I'm over 60 units, but now I found a purpose now, right? I was like, okay, well, if there are other physicians who are, burned out from being a landlord or have no interest in becoming a landlord or even want to delve into alternative investments to diversify their portfolio, then apartment syndications is a great way of doing that. And so it's helped me develop my purpose. and bring this out to the physician professional community. And I've actually had my first real estate meetup last month. It's called the Wealth Prescription, where I'm bringing this to Nashville as well. Because even though, yes, I'm on the LinkedIn space, as a physician, as a DO, I really love speaking to people in person, and I want to talk to people and see people. And so I had my first meetup, and that was so much fun. And I'm doing it again this month in Nashville, Tennessee. And that has been really, really fun. So just bring this, this information to other physicians and other professionals has been really, it's just so interesting how just life works, right? Like I was like all down in the dumps. And then from this, I found purpose and I found joy and I found passion. And I'm really glad that I did not give up on real estate, because I really found a way to not help me, but help others as well.
That's awesome. What a cool story. And I think, a few really important things to pull out of that is, again, to footstop the partnerships and understanding partnerships. Partnerships can be rocket fuel to success, but you have to make sure that alignment's there. Like you said, the vision, the values. You have to make sure you have a really good operating agreement in case something goes wrong. And this is one of the few times where you have to prepare for like the divorce before you get married. Partnership is like a marriage, but you have to understand like what is our vision, and most important, what is our alignment, and how can we work together? And those complementary skill sets are really important. Unfortunately, it sounds like it was kind of a painful path for you to learn that, but I think it's so awesome that you're willing to share that path and share some of those struggles and some of those, I wouldn't even say failures, but like learning opportunities with those first few properties, because a lot of folks listening to this are going to benefit from that. I think it's so important for folks to realize like you can save so much time and you can save so much frustration and you can save so much money by learning from people who have gone through a couple steps ahead of you, who have gone through the struggles, who have fought in the trenches going forward like you have. So I just wanted to foot stomp the partnerships perspective. The other thing too you mentioned was purpose in the mastermind and how uncomfortable you were when they were starting to talk about, hey, this is $1 million property. I think when you're in those rooms, when you're uncomfortable, that's when you're in the right place. That's when you're going to grow. That's that call to adventure right there. And some people here get that call to adventure and they feel uncomfortable and then they head the other way. And you just went for it and you're just going. Tony Robbins has a quote, and hopefully I'm doing it justice, but it's basically, you have to learn how to live in the uncomfortable. Like the more uncomfortable you can be, the more comfortable your life's going to be down the road. And so that's the rough gist of his quote, but it's just really important. And you embrace that. And then look where you are now with the 60 units and with the syndications and the meetup. And you also did the most important thing, and that's investing in human capital, right? And investing in relationships. And so really cool to kind of sit back. And I hope you've done it, maybe when you're preparing for this podcast and looked at your journey and that progression, and super cool. So I love hearing that.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's really interesting. And it's so interesting. This is something that I reflect on a lot. It's just the whole journey in general, how every down eventually became an up, right? Even from, I remember I was stressing about not finding a job, right? But like, that was everything that I needed to happen at that time, because it was preparing me to create space for my real estate business, right? And that is something that has given me a lot of purpose and joy. And it's been so much fun being able to bring that back to the physician and professional community. And so it's really amazing how this works. But I can say that it always started from a vision, right? Like during residency, I always knew that I was something about me was going to be different. And I just continue to lean in. Just continue to lean in and just allow doors to open. And I had to not be afraid to go into those doors, because I had to see what those doors were going to reveal to me. So I'm so proud of my journey. All the downs, I'm so grateful for everything, because it would not have made me who I am. Every single piece of it. And so I think it's so important that even though we may have challenges that's embedded within our story, it's so important to embrace them, because if it weren't for those challenges, I wouldn't have been here. And then it also shows just a testament of like faith, right? Of like the faith that it took to continue to persevere, even though I did not know what was going to happen, but I continued to persevere. So I'm grateful for every lesson because eventually it turned into a blessing.
Absolutely. That is well said. I think you have to go through the valley. You have to hike through the valley to get to the mountaintop.
Most
And
definitely.
yeah, and then sometimes there's some false summits along the way that you need to just stop and enjoy the view and look at how far you climbed and then just keep going. And that's really cool to hear that and hear your journey. In regards to those 60 units that you have, where are those located for you? And kind of what is your buy box, if you don't mind sharing? What are you looking for in terms of apartment investing?
Yes. So it's a 12 unit in North Carolina. This is in Mount Airy, North Carolina. I'm sorry, Curtisville. That one's in Curtis. And then I have the 54 unit that is in Mount Airy, North Carolina. And then I have one remaining duplex in Chicago. And so those are the units that I have. And the buy box is anything right now that's 50 plus or more value add apartment buildings in the Southeast region.
That's awesome. You mentioned the duplex, the 12 units, the 54 units. It sounds like kind of stacking up and also higher unit count. So have you realized that as you transition or as you hit more of that economies of scale, have you realized that it's really not that much more difficult to have more units? Or have you noticed it's been more difficult as you've increased the number of units with the apartments?
No, it's actually a lot easier, right? It's a lot easier because I work with a team. And so like my team is amazing, right? Like this is what I'm talking about. Like I absolutely love them. Like I can, call them at any time, speak to them. Hey, I'm having an issue. Hey, what do you think about this? I mean, I do this all the time with my team members. And so it's a lot easier because especially now when you're aligned with someone, right? Now when you have common vision and you have common values with someone, it's so much easier and it's so much fun, right? And so now it's a lot easier just because if I, and stumped on something, I can always call and vice versa. They could always call me. And so I'm never in this alone, right? Because I always have someone there who's able to help and we all act and together, it just enhances us, right? Because like we become like this superhuman because it's not just me working on something, it's all of us, right? And so we're able to work together as a solid team to get things done and to provide the best service for our residents. And that's what we take our pride in, is really making sure that we are making our properties into the best properties for our residents, that our residents feel happy, that they feel like there's a sense of community there, that they feel that we care about them, right? And it's like kind of similar with, medicine, like, your patients want to feel like you care about them at the end of the day, right? And so that's the same type of approach that we take with our buildings. And we all feel the same way, right? We all have the same sense of pride in delivering exceptional service. And I think that is what really brings us together, is that we really focus on high quality and exceptional service. And so that's what makes it exciting and that's what makes it fun, because we have that commonality that is that thread that brings us together and makes us such an exceptional team.
That is great. Yeah, once again, we kind of go back to that relationship capital there, importance of partnerships, importance of building that great team. Hopefully folks listening to this realize like the underlying theme is relationships. You had and partnerships, and you had kind of not the best experience with that in the beginning. And now you have exceptional partners, an exceptional team. And that's translating to great success, and probably also translating to, decreased vacancy, longer times that your residents are living in those units. And that ultimately is going to translate to a better return on investment. So, that return on capital and, return on investment is super important. And just awesome to see that journey from that perspective. And I wanted to hit one other thing here. You mentioned, the coaching and you had a coach. And we were talking before about a mutual friend we have, Nashima, and accountability. How do you feel like coaching and accountability has either improved your real estate journey or sped it up further than where you thought you would be?
Oh my goodness. Coaching is so life-changing because before I started my, coaching relationship with my coach currently and his mastermind, I had so many limiting beliefs. And even though I was in this room and people were talking about multi-million dollar properties, I was just like, I don't know if I belong here. But I just continue to go. And so even with the conference, I would go to because we have two conferences every year. And I haven't missed a conference yet since I started my mastermind. And even like I remember the first conference I went to, I was like, what is happening? Because it was like alphabet soup, because you're learning this new vocabulary and there's like so much math involved. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I don't know. I understand all this, but I kept on going, right? And I kept on going to the coaching calls and I kept on asking for support. And I continued to just always lean in no matter how uncomfortable I felt. And because of that, I have learned to become more aware of when my limiting beliefs come because they're still there, right? But now I'm aware of them like, okay, like I see you and don't try it because I see you, right? And so it's helped me become just more sharp of when those limiting beliefs do pop in. And if I need help or support, I know that I can always go to my coach and ask, hey, I'm feeling this type of way about something. Can you help me? And then usually all the time, it's just like a light bulb switch. Like, oh my goodness, like you just helped me get unstuck. And so it has helped tremendously because now I'm able to become much more aware of my limiting beliefs instead of becoming consumed by them. Because if you're not aware of what, those limiting beliefs are telling you, then you can get consumed. And then you go through a whole spiral and thinking that you're not good enough and thinking you can't do it and thinking that, you're in the wrong place. And so now I'm aware of my limiting beliefs and I'm able to approach them and say, hey, like, I know this is a limiting belief, but what do I know about myself to be true? Because all of that is fake anyway, right? They are lies. And so I have to always reposition and be like, okay, well, what do I know is true about me and go from there. And so that has given me, now it places me in a position of power because I'm able to see the limiting belief for what it is. And I'm able to reposition it from a limiting belief to then now an empowering belief. And that is what gives me the ability to keep on moving forward. And that, just doing that, that has life-changing, like absolutely life-changing to be able to have that as a skill, to be able to acknowledge, oh, this is actually not me. This is someone else. To be able to acknowledge that the limiting belief is not you and it's someone else, that has been life-changing for me. And so now I'm able to embark on, things that may feel scary to me, but now I'm able to lean into a community who's going to lift me up and then also be able to acknowledge when the limiting belief is trying to really stunt my growth. And I just tell that, the little devil on my shoulder to go sit down somewhere. And I just do it anyway.
Yeah, that mindset is going to take you really far. And that's something I feel like a lot of people struggle with is limiting beliefs. There's a quote that's basically the only thought you can't control is the first one. You can control your second thought, you can control your third thought, subsequent. And so oftentimes, that first thought comes in, that may be that limiting belief, and you have to be willing and you have to realize like, hey, I can control my thoughts after that. I can control that limiting belief and turn it around. Exactly like you said. I know there are folks that are listening. I was smiling while you were saying this because this is something that I've been working on as well, because I've really realized the importance of mindset and the importance of mindset to really grow. And I know that there are people here right now listening to this who just rolled their eyes at the word mindset and they're like, oh, I don't need that. Just tell me how to buy an apartment building. Trust me when I say this, that mindset is going to be the most important thing. You're going to realize that at some point and you're going to come back and be like, hey, Dr. J and Alex were right. This is really important. And so just, I'm really glad that you said that. I'm really glad that you brought that up. Dr. J, what are you working on? What's next for you in terms of real estate investing?
Yeah. So right now, like what we were talking about earlier, relationships, right? And so right now I'm focused in just building relationships with people who want to learn how to passively invest in apartment buildings. And so that is the purpose of my meetups that I've been holding. So I had my first up last month. I'm going to have another meetup on March 20th and plan to do them monthly as long as I don't have to be away on a locums assignment. And so that's what I'm focused on right now, is building these relationships, getting the word out there, providing the education. I know the first meetup that I had, so many great questions, right? This is something that, physicians and other professions, they hadn't even heard that this was a thing. And so to be able to provide that education, and it was really, really just fun for me to be able to provide something new. And I was really just glad that people were interested enough to ask me so many questions. And so this is something that I'm just having fun with, and creating community, right? Creating community in the city that I live currently, in Nashville, Tennessee. And so right now I'm just building and growing relationships in the hopes of when someone is ready to invest passively in an apartment building, then I can help them along the way, and I can help them, invest in their, first apartment building. And so that's what I'm focused on right now.
That's great. Those relationships are going to pay off, tenfold. So that's awesome. And I can't wait to see how the second meetup goes. And if you're listening to this and you're in Nashville, March 20th, get over there to that meetup. It's going to be awesome. Well, Dr. J, this was awesome. I want to be respectful of your time. How can folks reach out to you if they want to know more? I know you're all over LinkedIn and you're crushing it. So folks, go follow Dr. J on LinkedIn. But how can folks reach out to you if they want to know more or if they want to invest with you in the future?
Yes, well, you can certainly find me on LinkedIn. As Dr. Schloe said, I'm Janeeka Benoit on LinkedIn. I'm also on Instagram as Sis Negotiates. And then I also have a freebie for any physician or professional who want to learn more about passively investing in apartment buildings, called The Physician's Guide to Wealth, that I can provide you with. And you can link in the show notes and you can check that out.
That's awesome. Yeah, absolutely. We will have those links in the show notes. So folks, be sure to follow Dr. J and get the Physician's Guide to Wealth. Dr. J, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This was awesome.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. We'll have to bring you back in like a year or so and talk more about how you went from 60 units to 6,000 in a couple
we're going
years.
there.
Let's go. That is awesome. Well, with that, it's been Dr. Janeeka Benoit and Dr. Alex Schloe with another episode of the Physicians and Properties Podcast. Signing off.
Hey, real quick, if you're still listening to this, I'm assuming you got value from it. So I need your help specifically. My 2-year vision with this podcast is to help 100,000 physicians learn how investing in real estate can give you the freedom to practice medicine and live life how you want. There are 2 main ways that a podcast grows. One is through ratings and reviews, and the other is word of mouth. If you can please leave me a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, as well as send this to 1 to 2 friends that you think would get value from it, we can reach the physicians that we want to reach. Thanks in advance, and talk to you on the next episode. Please note that the information shared on this podcast is for informational purposes only. It should not be considered financial, medical advice. The views expressed on this podcast are those of the host and the guest and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Department of Defense or the United States Air Force.